There is a real federal government document that explains step by step exactly how to build a machine that converts wood chunks into combustible gas and feeds it directly into the engine of your truck, tractor, generator, or lawnmower. This fuel system costs $0 to run. You would be surprised to know that you already have all the materials you need sitting in your yard right now. It works on gasoline engines and older diesel engines. It worked so well during World War II that 500,000 civilian vehicles across Germany alone ran on it before the war ended. The document is called ORNL 6404. It was published in March of 1989 by Oak Ridge National Laboratory, commissioned by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and approved for unlimited public release by the U.S. Department of Energy. The United States government paid scientists to write it, they tested it, published it, and then watched it disappear into a file cabinet for 35 years while you kept filling up at the pump. Stay with me because before the end of this video, I am going to tell you about a farmer in Springville, Alabama, named Wayne Keith, who has not bought a meaningful amount of gasoline since 2004. You see, Auburn University tested his system, and the numbers are not what you expect. There is one detail inside that FEMA document, one specific design element buried on page 19, that explains why this works better than the wartime German systems and why it can be built from materials you can find at any hardware store this weekend. That detail is what this video is building toward. And yes, it applies to you, even if you already own a home, a truck, and a piece of property. You do not need to be starting from scratch. Let me take you back to 1942. France has fallen. The German military has control of the oil supply. Civilian vehicles across occupied Europe are being shut down because there is no gasoline to put in them. Factories are going cold. Food cannot be delivered. And then something remarkable happens. Mechanics begin bolting metal drums to the backs and sides of their trucks. They feed wood chunks into those drums. And when the wood gets hot, instead of burning, they gasify. Then it releases a combustible mixture of carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane that travels through a pipe, through a cooling system, and directly into the engine's carburetor, making the engine run. By 1942, when the technology had not even hit its peak, there were 73,000 wood gas vehicles operating in Sweden alone, 65,000 in France, 10,000 in Denmark, almost 8,000 in Switzerland, and in Germany. By the time the war ended, approximately 500,000 producer gas vehicles were on roads. Germany built a network of 3,000 fueling stations for firewood. Think about that for a moment. 3,000 roadside stations where you pulled in, loaded your hopper with wood chunks, and drove on. The system they used most widely was the gasifier, designed in the 1920s by German engineer Georges Imbert. Mass production of the Imbert unit began in 1931. These were not custom-built. They were one-of-a-kind machines manufactured at scale, bolted to trucks, buses, tractors, motorcycles, and some were bolted to tanks used for driver training. The gasifier sat on the outside of the vehicle, and the engine inside ran almost unchanged. But then 1945 arrived and the war ended. American petroleum flooded back into Europe at prices that made wood gasification look impractical by comparison. Not because the technology failed, but because cheap oil made it unnecessary. So every single one of those 500,000 vehicles went back to gasoline within a few years. The mechanics who knew how to build gasifiers retired, and the workshops that manufactured them converted back to other products. And within 2 decades, an entire operating fuel system had vanished from public knowledge as completely as if it had never existed. However, before it could have been suppressed totally, people already wrote it down. Because in the 1970s, when the OPEC oil embargo hit and Americans lined up around the block for gasoline, a researcher named Harry LaFontaine started paying attention to the old wartime records. LaFontaine was not just a researcher. He had actually operated a gasifier during World War II in Denmark as part of the Danish resistance underground. So when FEMA came looking for emergency technology assessments in the early 1980s, LaFontaine was exactly the right person to write the manual. The document he produced working with F.P. Zimmerman of Oak Ridge National Laboratory under FEMA Interagency Agreement Number EMW 84E 1737 was completed and published in March 1989. Its official title is Construction of a simplified wood gas generator for fueling internal combustion engines in a petroleum emergency. The document number is ORNL 6404. It is approved for unlimited public release. It is available free right now through the National Technical Information Service and through Internet Archive. The government paid for this research, published the instructions, and released them at no cost to every American citizen. The reason it gives for writing the manual is stated plainly on page 1, which is in the event of a war or a natural emergency, when liquid fuel supplies were interrupted, individuals could build gasifiers to run engines for transport and power. The government knew this could happen. They funded the research, tested a prototype, mounted it on a farm tractor, and ran it on wood chips alone. And they photographed every step of the process. The photographs are in the document. The materials list and step-by-step fabrication instructions are all in the document. However, for 35 years, almost nobody read it. Now, before I go further, I want to be straight with you because that is what we do here. A wood gasifier works on gasoline engines. It works on older diesel engines and engines that still use a carburetor or an intake manifold that can accept a gas mixture, but it does not work on modern common rail diesel engines, the kind found in trucks built after roughly 1990. So, if your daily driver is a 2018 diesel pickup, this is not a system for that vehicle. However, if you have a tractor, a generator, a pre-1990 truck, a lawnmower, or a UTV, you are exactly the audience for everything I am about to tell you. Now, let me tell you what FEMA's version of a gasifier actually looks like, because this is where it gets interesting. The old wartime design required a sealed fuel hopper. You see, every time you added wood, the system had to be opened. Gas vented into the air, and the operator had to be careful not to breathe the fumes during loading. It was a workable system, but it was cumbersome. LaFontaine's FEMA design uses a different approach. It is called stratified downdraft gasification. The hopper is open at the top. The air enters naturally from the top, flows downward through 4 distinct zones, and by the time it exits at the bottom, it has been converted into a clean, combustible gas. You can load wood from the top while the system is running without disrupting the process. The negative pressure concept means the gas is always being pulled through the system by the engine's own intake vacuum. There are no moving parts inside the gasifier itself, nothing electronic, and absolutely nothing that needs a circuit board or a computer. The entire body of the FEMA unit consists of a galvanized metal garbage can mounted on top of a small metal drum. It has common plumbing fittings throughout. A large stainless steel mixing bowl serves as a grate. Now, LaFontaine's document states clearly that the unit was fabricated from these materials, mounted on the front of a farm tractor, and successfully field tested using wood chips as the only fuel. The photographs documenting the assembly and operation are included. The materials are available at any hardware store in America. This is not a precision manufacturing project. It is a metal fabrication project that any mechanic who is reasonably proficient at working with his hands can complete. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch or starting a new homestead, you must stay with me because this next part is specifically for you. You see, you do not need a truck to benefit from a wood gasifier. The FEMA document is explicit. Wood gas generators need not be limited to transportation applications. Stationary engines can also be fueled by wood gasifiers to run electric generators, pumps, and industrial equipment. If you have a backup generator in your garage, you can adapt that generator to run on wood gas instead of or alongside gasoline. That means your backup power supply, the one you depend on when the grid goes down, can be fed by wood from your own property at zero fuel cost. Think about what that means. As the grid takes down the power, you do not call the utility company and wait. You do not drive to the gas station and find it sold out. You go to your wood pile, you load the hopper, you start the gasifier, and your generator runs. For the stationary application, the gasifier does not need to be mounted on a vehicle. It can sit beside the generator on a simple frame. The gas runs through a cooling pipe and a filter before it enters the engine. The FEMA document gives dimensions and materials for both, using primary items you likely already have on your property. There is no specialized filter media to buy. And here is the thing about the stationary use that most people miss. You are not running the generator all day. You are running it when you need it. The system starts producing usable gas within a few minutes of lighting. Run it for 2 hours to charge your batteries and power your refrigerator. Shut it down. The wood in the hopper preserves itself until you need it again. This is exactly the kind of resilience that the Amish communities I have spent time with understand instinctively. When I first started visiting farms in Holmes County, Ohio, what struck me was not the absence of electricity. It was the presence of systems that worked regardless of what happened outside the farm. These families had thought through what happens when the supply chain breaks. They had answered the question before it became an emergency. And their answer was always the same. Keep the skill inside the family. Keep the knowledge on the property. Do not let the solution live somewhere you cannot reach it when you need it. Wood gasification is that kind of knowledge. It is not complicated. It is not high-tech. It is chemistry that humans understood 150 years ago, but it has been priced out of memory by cheap petroleum, and that pricing is not permanent. Before I show you the most important detail in the FEMA document, I want to tell you about something else that is available right now in the description below. Before I show you the Wayne Keith numbers, and they are not what anyone expected, everything I have documented is in one place. The stove, the tunnel, the water, the fuel. Now, this is the Amish home system, link in the description. But stay here because what Auburn University measured on that truck is the part no fuel company wants published. Now let me tell you about Wayne Keith. Wayne Keith lives in Springville, Alabama, about 30 minutes north of Birmingham on I-59. He runs a small beef cattle operation, he has a homemade sawmill on his property, and he has not bought any meaningful amount of gasoline since 2004. He became interested in wood gasification in the 1970s during the oil embargo. Prices spiked, stations ran dry, and Keith started experimenting. Then petroleum got cheap again, and he set the project aside. In 2004, when prices climbed again, he drew a line in the sand. He went back to his notes, built his first wood gasifier, and retrofitted it to his truck. His words were published in Mother Earth News and on his own website. In the summer of 2010, Auburn University professor David L. Bransby from the Department of Agronomy and Bioenergy arranged a formal test. Wayne drove his 1993 Dodge Dakota on a 2-mile test track at Auburn's National Center for Asphalt Technology. It was 40 miles total at exactly 55 mph, first on gasoline, then on wood. The efficiency was calculated as distance traveled per unit of energy measured in miles per million BTU, so that gasoline and wood could be compared on an equal basis. Running on gasoline, the truck achieved the equivalent of 168 miles per million BTU. And running on wood, it achieved 231 miles per million BTU. That is a 37% improvement in fuel efficiency over gasoline, not equivalent to gasoline, which meant it was better than gasoline by 37%. The engineers who expected wood gas to come in at 50% of gasoline's efficiency were wrong because it beat gasoline. Keith also drove the truck coast to coast on wood gas from Springville, Alabama to Charleston, South Carolina, across the country to San Francisco, California, and back home. 7,188 miles total. He used gasoline only to start the engine. Everything else was wood from roadside stops, farm contacts, and sawmills along the route. He has since converted multiple vehicles and has driven over 250,000 miles on wood, and his wood chunker can process up to 2,000 LEBs of wood chunks per hour. 1 hour of work provides weeks of fuel. On September 9, 2011, with sponsorship from Mother Earth News, Keith drove to Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah and set the world wood gas speed record at 73 mph, independently recorded. The previous record was 46 mph. His 13-year-old son, Tally, made the trip with him. Professor Bransby noted something in his write-up that is worth sitting with. He said Wayne's truck is 67% cleaner than an electric vehicle charged on the Alabama grid, because 67% of the electricity in Alabama comes from fossil fuels. Wood gas run through an engine is cleaner than the electricity your plug-in vehicle uses in most American states. Now let me tell you what Wayne actually burns. He has never cut a live tree to fuel his trucks. He burns slabs, which are the offcuts from a sawmill, wood that would otherwise sit in a pile and rot. He also burns limbs, rough chunks, and any wood material too small or irregular for lumber. He does not buy firewood or harvest timber for fuel. Instead, he uses waste wood. Think about the properties you know. Think about the wood that accumulates after a storm, after a clearing, or along fence rows. That wood is fuel. A full cord of firewood in most rural areas sells for around $50. But Wayne Keith does not buy cords. He uses material that was in his way. At 1.25 miles per pound, at 30% moisture, that wood takes his truck 5,200 miles per cord. At $50 per cord, that is less than 1 cent per mile, and he pays zero because it is his waste wood. Let me also be specific about what wood works and what does not, because the FEMA document gives you guidance here, and Wayne Keith has spent 20 years refining it in practice. Firstly, you want dry wood, and moisture content matters enormously. You see, Keith runs his trucks on wood dried to around 30% moisture content. He lays the chunks out on tarps in the sun to dry before storing them in old feed sacks. Too much moisture in the gasification process produces cooler, wetter gas that does not burn cleanly. Think of it like a campfire. Wet wood smokes and dry wood burns. The gasifier responds to the same principle. Hardwoods produce more BTU per pound than pine, which means they take it further per pound of fuel, but Keith burns mostly pine and oak because that is what he has. He has also tested paulownia, hickory, and various farm waste materials. Nearly any wood species works, so you are not looking for premium timber. You just need to look for dry, chunked, small diameter material. The stuff that piles up in every rural yard and is usually burned as waste. The chunks need to be roughly 2 inches in diameter because if they are too large, the gasification process becomes incomplete. And if they are too small, it clogs the system. So Keith built a wood chunker from salvaged truck parts to process his material. You can do the same, or you can cut chunks by hand with a hatchet and a saw. For a stationary generator, a weekend of chunking can fill several feed sacks that will provide weeks of runtime. Moving on, here is something that will surprise you about the wood consumption. You see, when Keith drives his Dodge Dakota at highway speeds, the truck goes 1.25 miles per pound of dry wood. And at 5,200 miles per cord, the economics are clear. But for a stationary generator, running intermittently for backup power, the wood consumption is even more favorable. You are running a smaller engine under lower load. A well-tuned stationary gasifier feeding a 5 kW generator can run for hours on a modest hopper load. The calculation changes depending on your generator size and load, but the fuel costs stay the same, zero. This brings me back to the FEMA document and the specific detail I promised you on page 19 of ORNL 6404. The document describes the 4 stratified zones of the downdraft gasifier and explains why the design works better than the sealed invert units the Germans used in the 1940s. But the detail that most people miss is the great design. Now, the original invert system used a precision machined nozzle arrangement to introduce air into the reduction zone, and getting that nozzle geometry wrong would cause the system to produce tar-heavy gas that would clog the engine. This was the main technical barrier to amateur construction. Skilled machinists could build a working invert unit. However, weekend mechanics with a grinder and a welder often could not. However, LaFontaine's design solves this completely. You see, the grate is a large stainless steel mixing bowl turned upside down inside the lower drum. Holes are drilled in a specific pattern around the edge, and the bowl's geometry naturally distributes airflow evenly through the reduction zone without any precision machining. The cooking bowl does what the precision nozzle did, using a shape that costs $12 at any kitchen supply store. Now, this is the change that makes the FEMA system different from every wartime system. It brings the technical barrier down to the level of anyone who can drill a hole and weld a seam. The entire material list for the basic FEMA unit runs under $200. Most of it can be found at a single hardware store visit. So the generator to run your stationary backup power from this system adds the cost of hose fittings and a simple cooling coil, which can be made from copper tubing, bent into a spiral, and submerged in a bucket of water. The water cools the gas before it enters the engine. And the cooler the gas, the denser the fuel mixture, and the better the engine runs. I want you to hold what you just heard. A federal agency commissioned the scientists who had personally operated these machines during wartime. They tested it, documented it, and built a working prototype from hardware store materials. They publish the complete instructions at public expense and release them without restriction. And for 35 years, almost nobody outside a small community of off-grid researchers and homesteaders knew it existed. Not because it was classified or banned, but because cheap petroleum made it irrelevant to anyone who was not paying attention. And the people who control petroleum had no reason to make you pay attention. Roy Campbell left a comment on our last video asking about this exact document by name. He knew something was out there, but could not find it. That comment stayed with me because the people watching this channel are already looking. They already have the instinct that there is knowledge being overlooked. Roy was right. The Weekend Warrior said in his comments that hemp biodiesel costs $25 a gallon when you account for the full production costs. He is right. Wood is zero. Michael Montgomery pointed out that a 20-gallon per acre yield from other biofuels is not enough to matter on a small property. He is also right. Wood has no yield limit. If you have 2 acres with trees, a fence row, a wood pile, or a contact with a local sawmill, you have unlimited fuel. I want to be honest with you about one more thing. The gasifier produces carbon monoxide as part of its output gas. Carbon monoxide is odorless and toxic. The FEMA document addresses this directly and provides specific safety guidance. Use it outdoors or in a well-ventilated area. Do not idle the engine in an enclosed space. Install a carbon monoxide detector near any indoor installation. These are real precautions that matter. The wartime Europeans who did not follow them paid for it. The document tells you exactly what to watch for and how to avoid it. Take that section seriously. Beyond that, the system requires ongoing maintenance. You clear ash from the reduction zone regularly if it is used heavily every other day. You clean the filter periodically. You chunk your wood to roughly 2-inch pieces before loading. These are not complicated tasks, but they are tasks. A wood gasifier is not a set-it-and-forget-it system. It is a system you operate and maintain. Like every system that makes you independent, it requires your participation. There is something I notice every time I come back from time with these communities in Lancaster County or Holmes County. The families that have the most peace about the future are not the ones that have the most money. They are the ones that have the most skills that work without permission from anyone else. A man who knows how to heat his home, run his equipment, and preserve his food without calling a company is a man who cannot be cornered by a price increase, shortage, or even grid failure. That freedom does not come from a product. It comes from knowing something. The FEMA wood gasifier document is that kind of knowing. The knowledge existed before 1945. 500,000 vehicles proved it. Someone wrote it down because they understood what happens when the supply breaks. The government published it because they were afraid of exactly the kind of disruption we now see every time there is a hurricane, a pipeline failure, or a refinery fire. And then the price of petroleum came back down, and nobody needed to remember. But the good news is that you remember now. And here is what this means, practically for you this weekend. Search ORNL 6404. You will find the document on the Internet Archive and the Department of Energy's OSTI database. Both free. Download it. Print the materials list on page 22. Read the safety section first. They are pages 58 through 59. Look at the photographs in the back. You will recognize every material. You will recognize every tool required. If you have a welder and a grinder, you have everything you need to build the FEMA unit. But if you do not have a welder, find a neighbor who does. Gasifier building communities have formed around Wayne Keith's website, where detailed construction videos and a technical forum exist for exactly the questions you are going to have. The most expensive part of the build for most people is time. The materials run under $200 and the fuel, once you have it running, is whatever wood is already on your property. And before the next video drops, go check out the ebook link one more time. It is in the description right now. The methods in that book and the method in this video belong to the same tradition. Real knowledge, proven results, and zero dependency. This is the companion resource for everything we talk about on this channel. It goes deeper into energy, water, food, and heat. If you are serious about the path toward real independence from systems that charge you for things your grandparents handled themselves, that book is where you take the next step. There is one last thing I want to leave with you. Wayne Keith When Mother Earth News asked him to summarize why he chose wood gasification, he said the process makes a flammable vapor from burning wood. So it is basically the same process as gasoline. But wood is free. So it is safe to say that the knowledge was always there. It was just preserved by the people who understood that real independence is not bought, it is built. Trust me, you did not stumble onto this channel. You were already looking for exactly this. If you have ever had a moment where the gas price hit and you thought there has to be another way, drop a word in the comments right now. I want to know how many of us have been thinking the same. If this story has changed the way you look at the waste wood in your yard, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We are uncovering the history and technology that has been overlooked for decades. Let's build a more resilient future together. The next treasure of forgotten knowledge will be revealed soon.